This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Fleeing families in Libya plead with the UN to bring an end to strikes on civilians. Mali's Prime Minister and entire government resign over the Ouagadougou massacre. And the US urges Sudan's military to step aside and make way for a civilian-led transition. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Ghana to leave a $900 million IMF bailout program. And in sports, South Africa names its 15-man squad ahead of the 2019 Cricket World Cup. In our top story this hour, German ambassador to the United Nations, Christoph Heusen, is pushing the UN Security Council to quickly adopt a strong resolution on Libya to end the ongoing violence. Members of the Security Council met on Thursday but failed to agree on a resolution to call for a ceasefire. World powers have long been divided on how to stabilize Libya. Meanwhile, fleeing families are pleading with the UN to bring an end to strikes on civilians.
Families flee in pickup trucks as citizens and forces from the UN-backed government provided shelter and assistance in Al-Suwani. Airstrikes hit the densely populated city district, deepening the misery of civilians.
We say to the United Nations and Security Council, listen, rockets are coming down on us. For this reason, please find a solution for us. Haftar bombs civilians. His forces engage in random strikes on civilians with rockets, tanks and with shells. He ruined Al-Suwani.
We need to send this very strong message to the population that is desperate, and when you hear now rockets falling into civilian quarters, we need a strong voice from New York. It's very important that in this resolution also the question of the arms embargo is being raised.
In a symbolic move, the UN-backed government has issued an arrest warrant against Haftar for allegedly ordering deadly airstrikes against civilian areas. For the past 2 weeks, General Khalifa Haftar LNA troops have been advancing towards Tripoli in a bid to take the capital. But they have failed to penetrate Tripoli's defenses in its southern outskirts, creating a stalemate on the ground. The renewed fighting has killed over 200 people and left more than 900 wounded. An estimated 20,000 people have fled their homes. Chomrono, CGTN.
Well, the United Nations has expressed deep concern over clashes in Libya. The international body sees Haftar's offensive as a threat to Libya's stability. Haftar's push towards Tripoli has forced the UN to postpone a national conference that was set to draft a roadmap to elections. UN Special Envoy Ghassan Salameh now says international divisions prior to the assault emboldened Haftar.
I will remind the Security Council that the localization of the conflict these past 15 days should not reassure them, and that there is a possibility of it spreading wider. So they must be more active and more united in containing it. It's a military movement that is clearly aimed at occupying the center of power in Tripoli. I'll let everyone call it whatever they want. Khalifa Haftar had agreed to the idea of elections in the fall. That meant that if he wanted to get to Tripoli, it would be through the ballot box and not by armed struggle. But he went that way.
Let's go to Mali now, where the Prime Minister and his entire government have resigned. In a statement, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta accepted their withdrawal. Legislators from the ruling and opposition parties discussed a possible motion of no confidence in the government. Prime Minister Sumelu Babai Maiga and his ministers were accused of failing to handle an upsurge in violence in central Mali. About 160 Fulani herders died in a March attack in the village of Ouagadougou. A new Prime Minister and government are set to be named. The United States has called on Sudan's military to step aside and allow a civilian-led transition of power in the country. This comes almost a week after President Omar al-Bashir was ousted following mass protests. Bashir is said to have been moved to a high-security prison in the capital from the presidential residence. Demonstrators have said they will not cease protesting until their demands are met. The sit-in is the culmination of weeks of unrest triggered by a worsening economic crisis. U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary Makila James is expected to hold talks in Khartoum over the weekend to assess the situation on the ground. Meanwhile, South Sudan's President Salva Kiir is offering to mediate the political transition in Sudan. This after ousted President Omar al-Bashir was reportedly transferred to a high-security prison. CGTN's Patrick Oyet has more from the South Sudanese capital of Juba.
South Sudan's government has sent a delegation to Khartoum to meet with the Transitional Military Council on the agenda, Sudan's current political situation and a way forward. Sudan's former President Omar al-Bashir helped broker a peace deal for South Sudan last year. Sudan is also a guarantor of that peace agreement. South Sudan says it stands with the people of Sudan.
The President supports a transition where the rights of the Sudanese people and their democratic aspirations are protected and guaranteed, and shall therefore call for more open, inclusive, and smooth transition that bring on board even the armed opposition from the Darfur, Kordofan, and Blue Nile regions.
Juba says it has received assurances from Sudan's Transitional Military Council that South Sudan's oil will continue to flow to Port Sudan, then to the international market. South Sudan's airspace is also still controlled from Khartoum after it seceded from Sudan in 2011. Juba is urging the Sudanese people to ensure that a transition leads to a permanent peace in the country and the East African region as a whole. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Egyptians living abroad have started voting on constitutional amendments. If the referendum is approved, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi will be able to stay in office for longer, and he'll have additional powers over the judiciary. Opposition powers have rejected the amendments. However, it's not expected they can influence the vote. Here's Adel Al-Makhri with more.
531 parliament members have approved the constitutional amendments, citing the importance of President el-Sisi to stay longer to complete his economic reform. With only 22 MPs rejecting and 1 abstaining, the opposition is almost voiceless. Still, they've encouraged their supporters to vote no. While the president's supporters argue the amendments hold massive reform, the opposition believes the reform could have been achieved otherwise.
I don't think these amendments are necessary, with the exception of the changes to the presidential term extension. I believe all the articles are designed to appeal to the people, so they would think it's not only about the president. While in fact, all the other changes do not need to be a part of our constitutional change. I am definitely sad, and I believe that soon Egypt will be forced to correct these amendments.
While the parliament's majority coalition has swamped the streets with an outdoor campaign of support, the opposition voices could not be heard beyond social media. They are mobilizing their supporters to vote, yet it remains unlikely that they could sway the results of the referendum. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's go to Uganda now, where 1 more person has died after eating porridge prepared from the super cereal flour previously distributed by the United Nations World Food Programme. The death of a 6-year-old girl from Napak district in northern Uganda now brings the death toll of those who've consumed the porridge to 5. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria reports.
District authorities in Napak district say the little girl's mother was given the super cereal flour by a midwife at a local health center. The midwife is said to have kept the flour despite calls from the WFP to return it after the first 4 deaths were reported. 9 other people who consumed the porridge, in the same district are admitted in a hospital in a park. The north and northeastern parts of Uganda have gone through a long dry spell and it's hit by hunger. The reason? Some people could have kept the cereal. The WFP suspended the distribution of the super cereal in March after over 120 families developed complications after consuming it. Tests carried out indicated the flour contained aflatoxins, a poisonous substance that forms due to poor storage. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Nigeria's former Chief Justice Onogen is banned from holding public office for 10 years. And police in South Africa destroy illegal firearms in the fight against crime.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Ucheoko reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Nigeria Code of Conduct Court has banned embattled former Chief Justice Walter Onogen from holding public office for 10 years. According to the ruling, all the money held in 5 undeclared accounts by Justice Walter Onogen will be seized by the government. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
It's the end of the road for Justice Walter Onogen, at least as far as the Code of Conduct Court is concerned. He's accused of underdeclaring his wealth at the time he was appointed Chief Justice of Nigeria. The prosecution alleges he held several undeclared accounts contrary to mandatory requirements for public servants in Nigeria. Millions of dollars were found in those accounts and they were frozen even before the trial. Justice Onogen did not deny owning the accounts but said his failure to declare them was a mistake. But the court disagrees. It found him guilty of violating the country's assets declaration rules. It's unclear if he will appeal the judgment, but his lawyers think the sentence is unfair.
Judgment has been passed before today. So today's judgment was just a formality. And we hold the view that the tribunal has not only breached the Constitution of Nigeria, it has breached the fundamental principles of natural justice, equity, and good conscience.
Walter Onogen has attempted several times to challenge the jurisdiction of his trial, but hit a dead end. He also questioned the fairness of the Code of Conduct Court. Justice Walter Onogen retired weeks back after Nigeria's Judicial Council sent confidential recommendations about him to President Muhammadu Buhari. Details of the recommendations were not officially made public, but local media quoting officials in the president's office reported the council faulted Justice Walter Onoge but suggested a more lenient penalty. The conviction of Justice Walter Onoge is unprecedented, but also a very divisive one. His supporters see this as an intimidation of the judiciary by President Muhammadu Buhari, whose election victory is being contested in court. But the president has repeatedly said this is purely an effort to fight endemic corruption in the country's civil service. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Still in Nigeria, the country's Navy, in collaboration with the United States Africa Command, has carried out a joint maritime security operation targeted at sea pirates and oil thieves around Nigerian waters. 19 arrests were made at sea as naval forces of both countries boarded several ships, including a suspected rogue vessel where sophisticated weapons and communication gadgets were recovered. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more.
Codenamed Operation Joint Rain, the security operation comes barely weeks after the navies of the Gulf of Guinea countries carried out a massive drill to fight piracy in the region. This exercise is designed to enable the Nigerian Navy and their U.S. counterpart put to test in practical terms what they learned during the drill. The Nigerian Navy deployed 6 of its warships and 2 helicopters for the operation. Also part of the operation, a United States Coast Guard ship. For days, the team patrolled the waters of Nigeria, intercepting and inspecting some suspected ships.
In total, we were able to interrogate about 100 ships at sea. We boarded about 40 of them, which we suspected to may have not given us the accurate information. And in the process, 2 were actually arrested, 1 carrying arms and other things.
One of the ships boarded is this one. It had been deceptively painted in the colors of the Nigerian Navy, perhaps to avoid any suspicion. Naval forces arrested the entire crew and assembled them on the deck. After thoroughly searching the ship, they discovered high-grade weapons.
So we are using this opportunity to warn all criminals at sea that this operation has not ended per se. It's still ongoing. Unannounced, we will go to sea and we are going to do what we've just done. So there is no room for criminal operations at sea any longer. Any man that feels that he can come and disturb our waters, let him think twice.
Nigerian waters have always been a hotspot for piracy attacks in the past decade. But latest report from global maritime watchdog International Maritime Bureau says there being a reduction in reported piracy incidents in the first quarter of 2019. Giving the Navy credit for its effort. It, however, warns that Nigerian waters still remain risky, especially around the port of Lagos, where it says 4 incidents have already been reported this year. It's a clear sign that the Navy cannot just afford to drop the ball in its effort to make Nigerian waters safe for business. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, to waters further afield now, Singapore's formidable class missile frigate Stalwart has sailed into Qingdao port for next week's International Fleet Review. The Stalwart is the first of the visiting naval warships to arrive. China is holding a series of activities to mark the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy. CGTN correspondent Han Bin is in Qingdao and filed this report.
The port of Qingdao, home of the PLA North Sea Fleet. There is a festive atmosphere amid preparations for the Navy's 70th birthday. It's the first time here for Singapore Navy frigate Stalwart. This formidable class frigate was in China last year during the China-ASEAN maritime exercise off the coast of Zhanjiang City in southern China's Guangdong province. This visit has a special mission, the International Fleet Review. It's a tradition and common practice for naval exchanges. A brief ceremony was held to welcome the Stalwart and its crew. It's an opportunity for the Chinese Navy to extend this courtesy to its counterpart.
The journey has been good. It's my first time to Qingdao. Happy to be here.
So what is your expectations to be here?
Happy to be here. yeah, looking forward to the fleet review.
I think China wants to give a signal to the world that the Chinese Navy is open, friendly to the whole world.
It's the second time in 10 years that China holds an international fleet review. The PLA Navy is undergoing a deep transformation with a rapid development. China wants this event to improve mutual understanding and communications among the navies, and the real significance can go far beyond a fleet review. Han Bin, CGTN, Qingdao.
The National Assembly of Cote d'Ivoire recently adopted a resolution on electoral lists and women on electoral lists. This measure aims to promote women's representation in Ivorian decision-making bodies. CGTN's Laura Walubengo has the details.
More women mayors, deputies or regional delegates. This is what the Ivorian government plans to achieve through this draft law, which aims to promote equality of opportunity in political parties. This proposed law now makes it obligatory for any list of candidates to respect that men and women appear alternately on all lists.
Women have their way of analyzing problems and they are complementary to men. So if you want to create more jobs, to have an exclusive conscience, we need the contribution of women. So this law can only be an asset.
The spirit of this law is to call women to get involved in public life because society is made up of men and women. It's not only men who are capable of leading public life. Today, thanks to this law, we are certain that women will be more involved in political life.
This law will also provide incentives for political parties that reach the 50% mark of women's representation. Some activists of the Ivorian civil society, however, still find flaws in the new law.
The law, as written, is not going to be good for us at all, because there are undisclosed possibilities in this legislation that will continue to perpetuate the inequalities between men and women in decision-making bodies, especially in elected assemblies, and that is problematic for us.
Women make up 49% of the Ivorian population. According to gender experts, they are a minority in all Ivorian decision-making bodies. The application of this law could thus allow better involvement of women in the development and implementation of Ivorian public policies. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
A cholera vaccination drive has gotten underway in Zimbabwe, targeting about 500,000 people in the districts most affected by Cyclone Idai. While there have been no reported cases of the disease, the campaign is a preventative measure. More than 975,000 oral cholera vaccine doses will be administered in 2 rounds for full immunity. Flooding due to Cyclone Idai, which hit Zimbabwe, Mozambique and Malawi last month, destroyed water distribution systems in the targeted districts. The storm also severely damaged pumping stations and boreholes in areas where sanitation was already poor. Now, according to the World Health Organization, children and families are now at risk of water and foodborne diseases.
We come across this community. This is from this area, Chikukwa, Ward 10. So they are waiting for the food distribution. So we take the opportunity to give the cholera vaccine, and the community really took this with great enthusiasm.
It did not take time to mobilize them. It was just a minute. They've just cooperated. I thank the community for Ward 10 for actually appreciating us and also welcoming us to make sure that this program is a success.
On to South Africa now. Police have destroyed thousands of firearms in the continuing fight against crime in the country. Some guns were illegal, while others were voluntarily handed in to the police. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela has that story.
Over 30,000 firearms were destroyed here. The firearms include shotguns, rifles and pistols. Some of these firearms were recovered after they had already been used in crime-related incidents. Gun-related crimes are prevalent here in South Africa. An average of 19,500 firearms are reported stolen or lost in the country every year. That's 53 guns per day.
Most of the illegal firearms, they come out legal from the owners, and then there are break-ins, house robberies, people are shot taking the guns, some of them taken from our service, South African police, killing our members, taking the firearms. Sometimes our members naughty, giving the guns out there.
The last time the South African Police Services destroyed thousands of firearms and ammunition was in 2016. Cele says the police won't take that long to destroy them again.
In the store at the present moment, we have another about 60,000 that I can assure you it won't take a year from now on to destroy them going forward. The shorter you keep them, we are cutting off any naughty people, any naughty idea around selling them or leaking them out.
According to Gun-Free South Africa, international experience shows that firearms, ammunition and firearm parts in storage awaiting destruction are particularly vulnerable to being diverted, with risk increasing once details about them had been published. Thousands of firearms and over 1 million of ammunitions have been destroyed by the South African Police Services over the past 6 years. But police say there's still a long way to rid the South African society of illegal guns. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Vereeniging, South Africa.
In Uganda, the Supreme Court has upheld a constitutional amendment allowing candidates over the age of 75 to run for the country's highest office. This means President Museveni is eligible to run for the presidency in 2021. Politicians and civil society groups had challenged the move, concerned that it was anti-democratic. Isabel Nakiria reports.
I agree that the appeal should fail and that each party...
4 out of the 7 judges voted to uphold the decision of the Constitutional Court to have the 75-year age limit removed. The judges argued that Uganda's parliament has the authority to amend the constitution and that it did not err in its scrapping of the age limit.
I'm elated about the ruling. It was a well-researched, well-reasoned and a balanced ruling. Very, very balanced. As you heard, the lordships, every judge had sufficient time to do research.
But opposition leaders and civil society groups claim the move was illegal since the process leading to the amendment was marred by violence and intimidation.
The cardinal law, being the constitution, must not be played around for the interest of an individual, in this case President Museveni, for him to keep running for life presidency against the will and intentions of Ugandans.
Museveni is currently 74 years of age and would be over 75 by the time the next presidential elections are held in 2021. Mr. Museveni has already been endorsed by his ruling NRM party as the sole candidate for the presidency. The 3 opposing judges were concerned the constitutional amendment extending the age limit was unlawful. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
To China now, the success of the Chang'e 4 lunar mission was a new milestone in China's ambitious space exploration program. And now the country is looking to expand its international cooperation. CGTN's Jin Ying Chao explains.
On January 3rd, China's Chang'e 4 became the first spacecraft to make a soft landing on the far side of the moon. This success marked a new stage for the country's deep space exploration. It's also a step forward for China's international cooperation in space, as today scientific data from international payloads on board Chang'e 4 has been delivered to the Netherlands, Sweden and Germany in Beijing.
It is not the only cooperation that we have with China in the field of space, of course. We have quite a few programs in Earth observation. So using satellite data for agricultural purposes, for monitoring environmental conditions and so on. And those are programs that we very much look forward to continuing and to expanding in the future.
China National Space Administration invited international partners for cooperation on the Chang'e 6 and an asteroid exploration mission on Thursday afternoon in Beijing.
We have been trying to expand the cooperation with international space research institutions. We have already signed memorandums in lunar and deep space exploration with dozens of countries, such as Russia and France.
The landing of the Chang'e 4 on the far side of the moon was China's latest milestone in space exploration. China is becoming a major space power, but it also wants partners with international collaboration as it outlines the roadmap ahead. Jin Chao, CGTN.
Recapping your top stories this hour, German ambassador to the United Nations, Christoph Heusgen, is pushing the UN Security Council to quickly adopt a strong resolution on Libya and end the ongoing violence. Members of the Security Council met on Thursday but failed to agree on a resolution to call for a ceasefire. World powers have long been divided on how to stabilize Libya. Meanwhile, fleeing families are pleading with the UN to bring an end to strikes on civilians. In Mali, the Prime Minister and his entire government have resigned. President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta said in a statement that he has accepted the withdrawal of Soumelou Bébé Maïga. Legislators from the ruling and opposition parties discussed a possible motion of no confidence in the government. Maïga and his ministers were accused of failing to handle an upsurge in violence. A March 23rd attack by suspected Dogon community hunters was carried out in Ogasagu, a village populated by rival Fulani herders. The United States has called on Sudan's military to step aside and allow a civilian-led transition of power in the country. This comes almost a week after President Omar al-Bashir was ousted after mass protests. Bashir is said to have been moved to a high-security prison in Khartoum from the presidential residence. Washington lifted a 20-year trade embargo against Sudan in 2017. The Nigeria Code of Conduct Court has banned embattled former Chief Justice Walter Onogen from holding public office for 10 years. According to the ruling, all the money held in 5 undeclared accounts by the former Chief Justice will be seized by the government. And those are your top stories this hour. And coming up in your business news, Ghana to leave a $900 million IMF bailout program. And entrepreneurs in South Africa start an initiative to promote the use of eco-friendly bags.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, Ghana's economy is expected to grow rapidly this year, according to a projection from the International Monetary Fund. The country is set to leave a $918 million IMF bailout program set up in 2015 to help boost growth, jobs and economic stability. The world's body predicts Ghana's growth rate will reach close to 9% in 2019. And as CGTN's Naval Ahmed Rafai reports from Accra, the government says it's working on measures to ensure continued fiscal discipline.
The IMF and the World Bank say Ghana is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. The government says it's looking to consolidate recent gains. It's setting up a special body to monitor efforts to keep the deficit down.
We passed the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which essentially codified into law a cap on the fiscal deficit not to exceed 5% of GDP to ensure a positive primary balance at all times.
Ghana will no longer be required to follow the IMF bailout conditions, but some economists say the country should stick to those parameters, including maintaining a cap on public sector employment.
We should be disciplined with our expenses,
increase our revenue margins. Inflation is now, it is very high, in my opinion. We should be striving as a nation for bringing inflation to between 1 to 5.
The Ghanaian government has also plowed $800 million into stabilizing the country's currency, the cedi.
Our currency is not out of the woods yet, even though our monetary policy rate is coming down. Our inflation rate is coming down. If anything happens outside of the Ghanaian market and the dollar pricing improves, you will notice that we will still be struggling with supporting our exchange rate.
Meanwhile, the government has raised an additional $3 billion from a bond issue that it hopes will allow it to further bolster investor confidence and continue the economic growth established under the IMF regime. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Before the dawn of democracy in 1994, apartheid South Africa was seen around the world as a pariah state. The country was hardly on the map as a sought-after tourist destination. But what is the state of tourism in South Africa today as the country celebrates 25 years of freedom and democracy? Renee Delcam reports.
During the apartheid years, overseas arrivals in South Africa were largely made up of people visiting family members in the country. But there's been steady growth in the sector over the past 25 years.
Since 1994, we've seen quite astronomical growth in tourism arrivals in South Africa, both from the African continent and from overseas markets. What we've seen in the last few years is very impressive growth from both North America and South America, and of course India and China surfacing as potentially enormous source markets for South African tourism.
About 10 million international tourists visit South African shores every year. The government has set itself a target of doubling this figure by the year 2030, but admits it's already falling short of its target. The South African tourism sector has been adversely affected by negative factors such as stringent visa requirements, which were introduced in 2015 and has since been relaxed. A notoriously high crime rate and devastating drought conditions in the tourist mecca of Cape Town in 2018.
People were worried that Cape Town might run out of water. It wasn't going to happen, but of course many people changed their travel plans, and the consequence was that we had negative growth in international tourist arrivals in Cape Town. Similarly, perceptions of crime by any global standards for tourists and the kinds of things they do, South Africa is a safe place. Nonetheless, perceptions matter, and they have dampened tourist arrivals in our country.
South African tourism employs over 600,000 people, with a value chain of around 1.5 million people. And the government has identified it as a sector with huge potential.
Our forecast ahead is a very positive forecast, but right now, if we have to be honest, we're a bit flat right now. We're not where we thought we would have been a couple of years ago, but at the same time, we're aware of the factors, addressing the factors, and therefore we anticipate really good future growth.
And it's hoped that this growth will translate into more much-needed jobs in South Africa.
We just simply have a very beautiful, exquisitely beautiful country with a diversity of offerings. So from day one, I knew that this is something that can be sold.
Renee Delcam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Meanwhile, South Africa is joining calls to ban single-use plastics, which cause harm to the environment and marine life. Tanzania has become the latest African country to ban plastic bags, but South Africa is lagging behind, despite laws allowing consumers to be taxed for them. A newly opened plastic-free store in Johannesburg is hoping to drive change in South Africa's most populous city. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
The refillery, a quaint little Johannesburg grocer, is leading the change to rid the city of harmful plastics.
We worked out at sea for many years, so we saw literally firsthand the ocean, how bad plastic pollution is. And we both really wanted to do something. We've got two small kids, and we want our kids to travel one day and see how beautiful the world is.
I visited the store. There's not a single packet or any plastic packaging in sight. Customers can buy eco-friendly bags or bring in their own refillables.
We have all your dry goods, toiletries, cleaning products, teas, coffees in bulk, so you can bring in your own containers, Tupperwares, glass jars, fill them up. and nothing comes home in a plastic bag.
It's amazing because we all need to be conscious nowadays of what's going on with the climate changing, and this is actually a great help, a great start for everyone to, to be conscious and to make that change happen.
Big retailers have come up with greener options, but there's still millions of plastic bags in circulation causing widespread pollution.
It's really got to start from a governmental level where they ban single-use plastics. Even the shopping packets that you're getting from the supermarket, it's got to start there. We want to spread this as far and wide as we can, because that's when we can start having an impact.
It might be a new trend in South Africa, but this is how people used to shop back in the day. The truth of the matter is South Africans are trying to be more environmentally conscious. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And to Nigeria now. The government says relations with China have further improved and yielded positive results in the economy, infrastructural development and cultural friendship since it joined the Belt and Road Initiative. Both countries have held a number of forums to explore ways of striking mutual benefits from the initiative. One of them has just ended in the Nigerian capital of Abuja. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more.
Even before joining the Belt and Road Initiative, Nigeria enjoyed a robust relationship with China. It's China's third largest trading partner and its second largest export market in Africa. 21% of Nigeria's total imports in the first quarter of 2018 came from China, and quite a number of Chinese firms have opened shop in Nigeria. It's against that backdrop that Nigeria joined the Belt and Road Initiative. This gathering is one of several that has been held since Nigeria signed up to the BRI to discuss how both sides could leverage on the initiative for their mutual benefits.
One of the key things that Nigeria seeks to achieve under the Belt and Road Initiative is for China to transit from being a trading partner to a strategic investor in Nigeria through direct participation in the Nigerian economy by Chinese firms. We expect in particular, as relations are deepened, that the funding provided to support Nigerian development will come increasingly in the form of investments rather than as loans.
Reviewing the China-Nigeria economic cooperation, we have obtained enormous and spectacular accomplishments in infrastructure construction, investment, trade, and bilateral humanitarian aid. In terms of infrastructure projects, the Abuja-Kaduna Railway, Africa's first modern railway, with Chinese technology and standards, has been delivered in 2016. The terminal buildings in Abuja and Harcourt have been put into service for several months, and the construction of terminals in Kano and Lagos is proceeding smoothly.
Nigeria has a huge infrastructure challenge, and China indeed has been quite supportive in that regard by providing long-term concessionary loans for infrastructure projects. But beyond infrastructure, the Nigerian government aims to use the BRI to address the trade imbalance between both countries.
A good starting point will be the importation of processed goods from Nigeria rather than raw materials. For example, China can purchase industrial starch derived from cassava grown in Nigeria for its factories, just as it can import other goods and services from Nigeria, including feed and grain for its burgeoning animal husbandry sector.
Over 160 countries have signed up to the Belt and Road Initiative since Chinese President Xi Jinping launched it in 2013. In 2 weeks' time, China will host the second Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation in Beijing. Nigeria is expected to take active part in that forum and continue to push for a better deal with China under the BRI. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, Nigeria has announced it has no intention of removing subsidies on petroleum products. The International Monetary Fund previously advised the country to eliminate them to fund other infrastructure projects. According to Nigeria's finance minister, the country heavily relies on imports due to the domestic demand in the underperforming refining system. Nigeria emerged from a recession in 2017 caused by low oil prices and a currency crisis. However, the growth is fragile as the private sector's credit expansion remains sluggish. Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. A Washington exhibition shows how Senegalese women used gold.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Good as Gold exhibition at the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art in Washington, D.C. is the first major exhibition that focuses on the history of Senegal's gold. It showcases the beauty and complexity of the way Senegalese women previously used the ornament to present themselves. Let's take a look.
A voluminous dress woven with gold thread, conical headdresses, and layers of shimmering gold jewelry. The centerpiece of the Good as Gold exhibit at the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art in Washington. This is a modern interpretation of a seigneur, a woman known for her wealth and power in 18th and 19th century Senegal. The word seigneur comes from the Portuguese for lady, senhora, and the seigneur-inspired ensemble was commissioned by the museum to illustrate a principle of Senegalese fashion known as sanse.
On one hand, it means looking good, dressing up, but it also has this sense of moral worth, that you're showing your best self, that you're not only looking good, but that you feel good, that you are sort of exuding this self-confidence, this dignity, this sort of ability to sort of stand on your own 2 feet.
On display in the exhibit are more than 250 pieces of Senegalese gold and gold-plated jewelry, donated by art historian Marion Ashby Johnson, who began collecting in the 1960s. Most of the pieces in the exhibit are not extremely old. Senegalese jewelry made before the middle of the 20th century is rare because women often opt to have jewelry melted down and redesigned to keep up with current fashion. Seigneurs were renowned for their beauty and economic savvy. Modern-day women in Senegal still admire their approach to design, but there is a dark side to the seigneurs. These women who married European men often acquired their wealth from the transatlantic slave trade, and many owned slaves themselves.
These women were complicit by having these arranged marriages with Frenchmen, by being translators and cultural brokers. They were complicit with all the forces and powers that brought the French to Senegal, and that included the trade in enslaved humans. And we really do work to make that story as clear as we can to our visitors. We don't want to shy away from difficult stories.
Despite this difficult past, museum officials said the exhibit does not glorify slavery with its focus on seigneurs. The showcase runs through September 29, 2019. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Time for a short break. Your sports news up next. Coming up, South Africa names its 15-man squad ahead of the 2019 Cricket World Cup.